The Night Stalker. The summer Los Angeles stopped sleeping. In the summer of 1985, Los Angeles stopped sleeping. Windows that once stayed open for night air were shut tight despite the heat. Porch lights remained on until sunrise. Gun sales increased. Neighbors began checking on one another before bed. The city did not know his name yet. They only knew the pattern. He came after midnight. He entered quietly, and he chose houses at random. The first confirmed killing connected to what would become known as the Night Stalker occurred in 1984, but it was in 1985 that fear truly spread. Victims ranged in age from young adults to the elderly. Some lived alone, some with spouses, some in modest homes, others in middle-class neighborhoods. There was no clear profile, no consistent income bracket, no predictable district, just entry through unlocked doors or windows, and then violence. He often approached on foot, dark clothing, sometimes a baseball cap, sometimes gloves. He carried firearms or knives depending on the night. He moved through houses like a shadow, silent until he wasn't. The randomness was what paralyzed Los Angeles. If criminals target specific neighborhoods, people adjust. If they target specific demographics, people rationalize. But when victims appear unrelated, when geography stretches across counties, fear multiplies. In March 1985, an elderly woman was murdered in her home. No forced entry. The attack was brutal. Weeks later, another elderly victim, then another. In some cases, jewelry was taken. In others, nothing of value disappeared. Sometimes there were signs of ritualistic behavior. Sometimes strange symbols were left behind. But at first, detectives did not immediately connect the crimes. Los Angeles in the mid-1980s was vast and fragmented. Jurisdictions overlapped. Sheriff's departments handled some areas. City police handled others. Patterns are harder to see when data is scattered. It was only as cases accumulated that similarities emerged. Victims were often attacked while asleep. Windows left open for ventilation during warm nights, windows cracked open. Air conditioning was less common. The killer exploited routine. He watched neighborhoods in advance, studied which homes went dark first, which houses lacked security bars, which bedrooms faced side yards. He preferred darkness over confrontation, surprise over struggle. In one attack, a couple was assaulted in their bedroom. In another, a single woman. In yet another, an elderly man shot while asleep. The method varied slightly. The intrusion did not. The media began using the name the Night Stalker. The label intensified panic because it suggested someone moving through the city deliberately, someone hunting. Law enforcement faced mounting pressure. The killer left behind limited physical evidence. In one instance, a shoe print was recovered, an uncommon brand, size 11, Avia sneaker. That detail would later become critical, but at the time, it was just a clue without a face. In some crime scenes, investigators noted symbols drawn, pentagrams or references to satanic imagery. This fueled media frenzy. Talk radio amplified fear. Rumors spread. Parents forbade teenagers from staying out late. Security companies advertised aggressively. Gun ranges filled with first-time buyers. Los Angeles in 1985 was already grappling with crime waves and gang activity, but this was different. This was intimate. Home invasion erodes the illusion of safety more deeply than street crime. It reaches into bedrooms, into moments of vulnerability. Late at night, when ceiling fans turn slowly and houses cool down, silence becomes noticeable. That summer, silence became suspicious. In July 1985, a fingerprint was lifted from a stolen vehicle connected to one of the crimes. The print belonged to Richard Ramirez. He was 25 years old, a drifter, born in Texas, raised in an unstable household, exposed early to violence and disturbing influences. He had moved to California in his early 20s, living transiently, hotels, friends' couches, cheap apartments. He had prior arrests for theft and drug possession, but nothing that prepared the public for what would unfold. Before his identity was known publicly, Ramirez continued attacking. Victims described a thin man with dark hair, sunken eyes, a strong odor, poor dental hygiene that some later recalled vividly. He sometimes demanded money, sometimes jewelry, sometimes simply entered and attacked without prolonged interaction. In certain attacks, he forced victims to swear allegiance to Satan. These details, reported widely, intensified media sensationalism. But beyond the shock value, the core pattern remained. He chose unlocked entries. He struck between midnight and 4 a.m. He fled before neighbors could react, and he left entire households terrified. The police began coordinating more aggressively between jurisdictions. Task forces formed. Ballistics reports linked firearms used in multiple attacks. The Avia shoe print appeared at several scenes. Detectives canvassed shoe stores, tracked recent purchases. The brand was not widely distributed. It narrowed possibilities. But Los Angeles County holds millions of residents. The field was still vast. In late July 1985, 2 elderly women were attacked in Monterey Park. One survived. She provided a description that matched earlier witness accounts. The composite sketch circulated rapidly. It was broadcast on television, printed in newspapers, distributed to patrol officers. For the first time, the city saw a face. Thin, dark eyes, angular features. The effect was immediate. Tips flooded in, but many were false. Paranoia can distort identification. People began seeing the Night Stalker everywhere, in grocery stores, on buses, at gas stations. The real Richard Ramirez continued moving quietly, sleeping during the day, walking at night, sometimes taking public transportation, sometimes hitchhiking. He did not fit a polished criminal profile. He was erratic, addicted to cocaine, prone to impulsive decisions. But at night, he demonstrated focus, selection, entry, exit. In August 1985, a major break occurred. Ramirez left behind a fingerprint on the rearview mirror of a stolen Toyota. This time, it was clear. The print matched one already in the system from a previous arrest. His name became public: Richard Ramirez. The Night Stalker had a face and a record. Police released his mugshot. Television stations aired it repeatedly. Newspapers printed it on front pages. The city's fear shifted from unknown predator to known fugitive. But that did not reduce danger. It intensified the hunt. Once the name Richard Ramirez was released to the public in August 1985, Los Angeles shifted from fear to pursuit. His face was everywhere. Television broadcasts interrupted programming with updates. Newspapers printed his mugshot in bold ink. Radio hosts repeated the name hourly. The anonymity that had protected him vanished overnight. But before the identification became public, the violence had escalated. In the weeks leading up to the reveal, Ramirez attacked repeatedly. Couples shot in their beds, women assaulted in living rooms, elderly victims beaten without warning. He did not follow a strict victim type. Age ranged widely, neighborhoods varied, income levels differed. This randomness made profiling difficult. The Avia shoe print continued appearing at scenes. Detectives tracked distribution records and learned that only a limited number of that specific model had been sold in the Los Angeles area. It was not mass-produced. The rarity helped narrow investigative focus, but it did not immediately produce a suspect. Then came the fingerprint, lifted from the rearview mirror of a stolen vehicle abandoned after one of the attacks. The print was clear, strong, undeniable. It matched an existing record for Ramirez from a previous arrest. For the first time, they had more than pattern. They had identity. But Ramirez did not know immediately that his name had gone public. He continued moving as if still invisible, staying in cheap motels, visiting acquaintances, traveling by bus between neighborhoods. When he finally saw his face on television in late August 1985, the manhunt shifted into something volatile. Los Angeles was no longer just frightened, it was alert and angry. Residents began watching strangers more closely. The composite sketch had already created suspicion. Now the confirmed photo made recognition possible. On August 30th, 1985, Ramirez returned to Los Angeles after a brief trip to Arizona. He stepped off a bus at the Greyhound terminal downtown. He did not yet know that his image was on every news broadcast. As he walked through East Los Angeles, residents recognized him almost immediately. Someone shouted, another pointed. Within minutes, a crowd began forming. This was not organized law enforcement. This was spontaneous public reaction. People chased him through streets. He attempted to carjack a vehicle. The driver fought back. He was struck by bystanders, beaten, held down until police arrived. The man who had stalked sleeping homes was captured in day broadlight by the very city he had terrorized. The image of his arrest became symbolic, not just police capturing a fugitive, but a community responding collectively. When officers arrived, Ramirez was bloodied but alive. He smiled at cameras, raised a hand with a pentagram drawn on it during court appearances later. But at the moment of arrest, the panic in Los Angeles began to shift into relief. Still, relief does not erase trauma. The list of victims was long. More than a dozen murders, multiple sexual assaults, numerous attempted killings. Survivors carried permanent scars, physical and psychological. Ramirez's pattern exploited something simple: unlocked windows during warm nights, routine, trust in domestic space. He did not need elaborate planning. He needed opportunity. He walked neighborhoods looking for vulnerability. A window slightly open, a door without deadbolt. He entered quietly, often through a rear entrance, sometimes by climbing. He moved through homes with surprising calm, demanding money in some cases, assaulting without warning in others. There was no consistent script.
that unpredictability amplified fear. Some attacks included forced declarations of satanic allegiance. Ramirez embraced the label publicly after media began reporting it. He leaned into the image. Courtroom theatrics would come later, but during the summer itself, the horror was less theatrical. It was domestic. A husband shot beside his wife, an elderly woman beaten in her sleep.
A child awakened by gunfire. The Avia shoe became a symbol in its own right. Investigators distributed bulletins asking store owners about recent purchases. They cross-referenced receipts, interviewed clerks. The shoe print tied multiple scenes together conclusively. Without it, the crimes may have remained fragmented. Different jurisdictions might not have connected them as quickly. In the aftermath of his capture, law enforcement reviewed each scene meticulously. Ballistics evidence confirmed links between shootings. Fingerprint matches tied him to burglaries. Stolen items recovered. The picture sharpened. But for the residents of Los Angeles, the sharper image did not erase the months of fear. Parents remembered keeping lights on all night. Neighbors remembered forming informal watch groups. Some residents slept with weapons beside their beds. Security bars were installed across thousands of windows that year. Home alarm companies saw record demand. The Night Stalker had changed physical architecture in parts of the city. Metal bars became common in neighborhoods that previously left windows open. The psychological shift lasted longer than the crime spree. Late at night, the echo of that summer still feels present in the story. Because what Ramirez exploited was not wealth or poverty, it was routine. The assumption that midnight belongs to sleep, that windows can remain open for breeze, that quiet neighborhoods stay quiet. He moved between communities without prejudice, selecting houses based on accessibility rather than status, and that randomness created universal vulnerability. When the manhunt concluded with his capture, the city exhaled. But closure is never immediate. Each victim represented a separate rupture. Each surviving family carried memory into the future. And the city itself retained a lesson about darkness. To understand how the summer of 1985 unfolded the way it did, investigators eventually turned to the early life of Richard Ramirez. He was born in 1960 in El Paso, Texas. His childhood was marked by instability, violence, and exposure to disturbing influences at a young age. One of the most frequently cited influences was an older cousin, a Vietnam War veteran who reportedly shared graphic stories of violence and combat. There were accounts that this cousin showed Ramirez photographs depicting brutality from the war. In at least one documented incident, the cousin shot his wife in front of Ramirez during an argument. Exposure to violence during formative years does not predetermine criminal behavior, but repeated exposure without stability can distort boundaries between imagination and action. By adolescence, he had already begun engaging in petty theft and drug use. He dropped out of school, moved frequently, drifted. His criminal record prior to the Night Stalker murders included burglary and narcotics charges. He was not a model citizen, but he was not yet publicly known as a violent offender. When he relocated to California in the early 1980s, he lived transiently. Cheap motels, friends' couches, occasional day labor. He developed a cocaine addiction. Substance use fueled erratic behavior, but also extended wakefulness, useful for someone who preferred to move at night. Ramirez did not conform to a single psychological category. He did not exclusively target one age group. He did not confine himself to one neighborhood. This unpredictability made profiling difficult. Many serial offenders demonstrate narrow patterns, specific victim types or locations. Ramirez's pattern was broader. His common denominator was vulnerability. Unlocked doors, accessible windows, sleeping occupants. He exploited opportunity rather than personal grievance. The satanic symbolism reported at several scenes drew intense media focus. Pentagrams carved on skin or drawn on walls. Verbal references to Satan. In court later, he would flash a pentagram on his palm. But psychological experts have debated how much of this represented belief versus performance. Some argue that he adopted the symbolism as an identity, something dramatic and fear-inducing. Others believe it reflected a genuine fascination. Regardless of motivation, it amplified terror, because it transformed burglary into something ritualistic in public perception. But beneath the symbols, the core remained intrusion and violence. In many cases, he shot victims first to neutralize resistance. In others, he used knives or blunt force. Sexual assault occurred in several attacks, but not all. There was no singular script. The inconsistency itself increased unpredictability. Late at night, when ceiling fans spin and houses settle into silence, the randomness of his selection feels most unsettling. He did not stalk one person over months. He stalked entire neighborhoods, walking streets after midnight, observing which homes were dark, testing doors, lifting screens quietly. He carried firearms when available. If not, he used knives. If not, he used objects within reach. Improvisation was part of his pattern. The Avia shoe print was one of the few consistent physical markers tying multiple scenes together. Investigators traced the shoe model to a limited retail distribution. When his arrest occurred, police found shoes matching the print in his possession. That link strengthened the chain of evidence. After his capture, detectives revisited earlier unsolved cases. Some earlier murders were reclassified as connected. The scope expanded. Ramirez's crime spree spanned roughly 14 months. The summer of 1985 was its most intense phase, but the fear it generated lasted far longer. Psychologically, Ramirez exhibited traits consistent with antisocial personality disorder: lack of remorse, manipulation, impulsivity. He reportedly smiled in court, made dramatic gestures, attempted to control the narrative. But courtroom performance is often superficial. The deeper pattern lies in behavior. He chose times when occupants were most vulnerable. He avoided confrontation during daylight. He fled quickly after assaults. He did not linger long at scenes beyond what was necessary to assert control. Despite media portrayals that leaned heavily into satanic imagery, the core behavior was opportunistic home invasion combined with extreme violence. That combination destabilizes communities because it turns the private sphere, the bedroom, into a site of fear. Los Angeles in 1985 became a case study in how serial crime reshapes urban behavior. Window bars increased. Neighborhood watch groups expanded.
Gun ownership rose. Even after his arrest, many residents kept lights on overnight for months. The Night Stalker became shorthand for vulnerability in darkness. For the victims' families, media attention offered little comfort. Names became headlines, faces circulated, but grief is not reduced by national awareness. Each home invasion was its own world shattered. Each survivor carried memories that extended far beyond the summer. In the broader narrative of American serial crime, Ramirez occupies a distinct place, not because he was the most methodical, not because he had the highest victim count, but because his attacks were spread across such a vast urban area in such a short time. The city felt under siege, and siege implies collective threat. After the arrest of Richard Ramirez in August 1985, Los Angeles did not immediately return to normal. Relief is not the same as restoration. The fear that had spread across neighborhoods did not evaporate overnight. Windows remained locked even during heat waves. Security bars stayed installed. Porch lights burned until dawn. The Night Stalker had changed behavior patterns permanently. For months, residents had gone to sleep wondering if their home would be the next one chosen at random. That randomness was the most destabilizing element. He did not confine himself to one block. He did not follow a predictable demographic pattern. He did not limit his victims by age. Children, elderly couples, young adults, anyone whose door or window offered opportunity. After his capture, police re-examined earlier unsolved burglaries and homicides across the region. Ballistics reports linked multiple shootings. Fingerprints confirmed connections. Stolen jewelry and personal items recovered from his possessions strengthened the chain of evidence. The shoe print, the size 11 Avia, remained one of the most significant physical anchors tying scenes together. Without that print, the crimes might have remained fragmented across jurisdictions. Instead, it became a symbol of the investigation's turning point. During trial proceedings, Ramirez embraced notoriety. He flashed satanic symbols in court, smiled at cameras, attempted to project defiance. But courtroom theatrics do not change the pattern of behavior that defined the spree. The true weight of the case rests not in headlines, but in households. Bedrooms, once considered private, became scenes of violence. Couples who had slept with windows open for decades began installing steel bars. Entire neighborhoods coordinated informal patrols. The summer of 1985 entered collective memory as the season when Los Angeles did not sleep. Late at night, when this story is told slowly, the most unsettling realization is how little separated safety from danger. An unlocked window, a thin screen, a sliding door without reinforcement, that was often enough. He did not rely on complex planning. He relied on accessibility, and accessibility exists in every city. In many serial cases, victims share characteristics. In this case, what they shared was vulnerability in routine, sleeping, trusting the quiet, believing the door was secure enough. The cultural impact extended beyond Los Angeles. National news amplified the fear. Other cities reviewed cold cases. Homeowners across the country reconsidered security habits. The term Night Stalker entered popular vocabulary as shorthand for unseen threat after midnight. Yet beneath the media narrative lies a simpler and heavier truth.
Lives ended violently in spaces meant for rest. Survivors carried trauma forward. Families rebuilt without answers that could restore what was lost. The randomness remains the defining feature. If there had been a clear grievance, fear might have been localized, but randomness dissolves boundaries. It tells every household, you could be next. That is why the case still resonates decades later. Not because of satanic symbols, not because of courtroom spectacle, but because it targeted the universal human need for safety in sleep. When the city captured him, not just police, but residents who recognized and chased him, it symbolized something larger, a community pushing back against prolonged fear. Yet fear leaves residue. Even after sentencing, even after incarceration, even after years passed, security bars remained on many windows installed that summer. The architecture of Los Angeles changed subtly because of him, and architecture is memory in metal. The Night Stalker case stands as a reminder that vulnerability often lies in routine, in small decisions, in habits repeated nightly, and that sometimes the most dangerous predators rely not on complexity, but on opportunity. When lights go out and houses settle, the illusion of safety feels natural. But in the summer of 1985, Los Angeles learned that illusion can fracture quietly. One window, one step inside, one city holding its breath. Thank you.